My sister's fake illness was my family's downfall. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My mother handed me the eviction notice, crying that my sister's life was worth losing the house. She didn't know her daughter was perfectly healthy. I stood in the doorway of my childhood home, clutching the crinkled yellow paper. The living room looked less like a family space and more like a gloomy hospital ward. Oxygen tanks, though rarely used, sat in corners. Stacks of medical bills covered the dining table like a morbid tablecloth. My mother, Helen, looked 10 years older than her 60 years, her eyes hollowed out by perpetual, manufactured grief. "We have to be out by the end of the month, Chloe," she sobbed, collapsing onto the faded sofa. "But it's fine. It's all fine. The new experimental treatment for Mia will work. Tom is talking to a bankruptcy lawyer right now." My dad, Tom, had been a proud, hard-working man. Now he was a hollow shell, working double shifts just to keep the lights on for my 31-year-old sister, Mia. "I'm Chloe. I'm 28. I work in hospital administration, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the forgotten sibling. The selfish one who went to college instead of staying home to nurse a sister whose symptoms changed whenever she wasn't the center of attention. Mia is a professional victim, a master at weaponizing sympathy. I looked around the house I grew up in, a house my parents were now losing because they had remortgaged it to the brink to pay for Mia's endless, vague, undiagnosable agonies. Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, mystery autoimmune disorders. The labels shifted constantly. What do you do when the person you're supposed to pity is actually a predator draining your parents dry? "Mom, let me look at the clinic's invoices," I said softly, my administrative brain kicking in. "Maybe there's a billing error. Hospitals make mistakes." My mother snatched the papers away, her sorrow instantly hardening into fierce, defensive anger. "Your sister is fighting for her life. Stop treating this like a spreadsheet." She didn't know it, but that was the exact moment I stopped feeling sorry for my sister and started paying very close attention to her. I had no idea my questions would soon destroy our entire family. Growing up with Mia was an exercise in strategic invisibility. If I had a dance recital, Mia would suddenly develop severe migraines that required total silence and absolute darkness, meaning my parents couldn't attend. If I brought home a straight-A report card, Mia would collapse in the hallway, clutching her stomach and sobbing about mystery pains that the ER doctors could never quite pinpoint. By the time I was 16, I stopped expecting my parents to show up for me. "You have your health, Chloe," my dad, Tom, used to tell me, his voice heavy with a mix of exhaustion and guilt. "Mia needs us. You're strong. You don't." That was the narrative. I was the strong, practical, independent one, which in my family's translation meant I was the one they could afford to neglect. Mia, on the other hand, was a fragile glass doll that required constant, expensive maintenance. The resentment didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing drip. But the freshest wound happened just 2 months ago. It was my graduation from a specialized healthcare management program, a degree I paid for entirely on my own through grueling night shifts. I had reserved a table for 3 at a nice restaurant. I sat there for 2 hours, alone. When I finally called home, my mother answered in frantic whispers. "Chloe, please, we can't talk. Mia had a severe flare-up. We're icing her joints. We can't leave her." I went to my apartment, ate cold takeout, and cried. The next morning, I saw Mia's latest Instagram story. It was a picture of her hand clutching a mug of herbal tea, captioned, "Grateful for parents who drop everything when my invisible illness strikes." She had thousands of followers who validated her daily. I was just the bitter sister who didn't understand her daily agony. But working in a hospital had trained me to spot inconsistencies. Real chronic illness is exhausting, messy, and devastating. Mia's illness always seemed perfectly timed, highly photogenic, and incredibly convenient for getting exactly what she wanted. I started keeping a mental log of her behaviors. The small, strange things that didn't add up. I finally saw something that shattered the delicate illusion my sister had built. The first real crack in Mia's facade happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I had taken a half day off to run errands and stopped by a strip mall a few towns over to pick up a specific brand of coffee my dad liked. I was hoping a peace offering might thaw the tension between us. As I walked out of the store, I froze. Across the sprawling, half-empty parking lot, someone was jogging. Not just walking fast, jogging with a brisk, energetic stride toward a shiny silver SUV. It was Mia. The same Mia who, just 3 days earlier, claimed she was entirely bedridden and needed our mother to carry her meals up the stairs. I watched, paralyzed, as she effortlessly hopped into the driver's seat, completely unencumbered by the debilitating joint pain she constantly complained about online. I pulled out my phone to record, but she was already backing out and speeding away. Did I imagine it? Was I just seeing things because I wanted to? I went to my parents' house to drop off the coffee, my heart pounding. When I walked in, Mia was lying on the living room sofa, wrapped in a blanket, groaning softly while my mother spoon-fed her soup. "I can barely move my legs today," Mia whispered weakly. The contrast made me feel physically sick to my stomach. I went into the kitchen to put the coffee away and noticed a piece of mail sitting on the counter. It looked like a medical bill, which wasn't unusual, but the return address caught my eye. It wasn't from her supposed rheumatologist. It was from a luxury wellness spa in Sedona, Arizona. The amount due was staggering. I quickly snapped a photo of it with my phone before my mother walked in and hastily shoved the envelope into a drawer. "Just more of Mia's holistic treatments," she muttered, looking away. Holistic treatments in Sedona? With what money? I knew for a fact Mia hadn't worked a paying job in 6 years. My administrative brain started buzzing. Bills like that didn't just appear out of nowhere, and bedridden people don't jog to their cars. I was doubting my own sanity, but the evidence was starting to pile up right in front of me. Something was very wrong. I realized I needed to dig deeper into the lies she was telling us. The real nightmare began the following week when my parents called an emergency family meeting. I walked into their house to find the atmosphere thick with tension. My dad was pacing the floor, rubbing his temples, while my mother held Mia's hand on the sofa. Mia was wearing her favorite oversized, sad-looking sweater, staring mournfully at the floor. "We've made a decision," my dad announced, his voice trembling. "Mia's doctors say her condition is deteriorating rapidly. There's an experimental stem cell clinic in Germany. It's her only hope." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what my dad's financial situation was. He was a retired high school teacher. My mom had been a receptionist. They had nothing left. "Dad, how are you paying for this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "We're liquidating the last of my 401k, and we've taken out a second mortgage. It'll cover the first round of treatments." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're bankrupting yourselves. You're going to lose this house for a treatment that isn't even FDA approved." I pleaded. "Have you seen the clinic's credentials? Have you spoken to her actual doctors here?" Mia let out a sharp, theatrical gasp. She clutched her chest, her eyes rolling back slightly. "Chloe, please, the stress. It's triggering my heart rate," she panted, slumping against my mother. Immediately, chaos erupted. My mother shrieked, grabbing a cold compress, while my dad turned on me with a look of pure hatred. "Look what you're doing to her," he yelled. "She is fighting for her life, and all you care about is money. You've always been jealous of her. What do you do when the people you love are enthusiastically destroying themselves for a parasite?" I stood my ground. "Dad, please, just let me look at her medical file. I work in a hospital. Let me just read the referrals." Mia let out a loud wail, burying her face in a pillow. My mother pointed a trembling finger at the front door. "Get out of this house and don't come back until you can support your sister. You are acting completely heartless." I walked out the door knowing I was completely alone in this terrifying fight. The exile was swift and absolute. My parents blocked my number. My mother unfriended me on Facebook. I was officially the toxic, abusive sibling who was trying to send her dying sister to an early grave through sheer cruelty. For the first few days, I just sat in my small apartment, paralyzed by guilt and anger. Was I wrong? Was I just a bitter, jealous sister? The psychological warfare of a family in denial is brutal. They make you question your own grip on reality. I almost caved. I almost drove back to their house, fell on my knees, and apologized just to have my parents back. But then I remembered the jog in the parking lot. I remembered the spa bill from Sedona. My grief turned into a cold, hard resolve. I decided to stop enabling their delusion. If they were going to label me the villain for asking basic medical questions, then I was going to play the role of the investigator perfectly. I needed an ally, someone who spoke the language of medicine and wouldn't be swayed by Mia's tears. I called my best friend David. David is 30, a registered nurse who works in the ER at my hospital. He's seen every kind of faker, drug seeker, and hypochondriac on the planet. We met up at a sterile hospital coffee shop, the harsh fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the emotional fog I'd been living in. I laid everything out for him. The sudden miraculous recoveries when no one was looking, the vague diagnoses, the refusal to let me see any official paperwork, and the impending bankruptcy of my parents. David listened quietly, sipping his black coffee, his face unreadable. When I finished, he leaned forward. "Chloe," he said gently, "what you're describing sounds a lot like factitious disorder imposed on self. But if she's raising money off of it, it's not just a psychological issue. It's criminal." Hearing a medical professional validate my suspicions was like taking my first full breath in years. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't toxic. I was the only one seeing clearly. We needed undeniable proof, and I knew exactly where we should start looking. Our investigation started where Mia's entire life took place, the internet. Mia had built a massive following on social media, documenting her brave journey against her mysterious illnesses. She had a GoFundMe page that had raised over $60,000 over the last 2 years, supposedly for medical devices, home care, and travel to specialists. I sat at my laptop with David looking over my shoulder as we scrolled through her deeply emotional updates. "Stop right there," David suddenly said, pointing at the screen. It was a photo Mia had posted 3 weeks ago, claiming she had been rushed to the ICU for severe organ distress. She was looking pale, lying in a hospital bed with an 4-line, looking tragically beautiful. "Look at the wristband," David instructed, squinting at the pixels. I zoomed in on the white plastic band around her wrist. The text was blurry, but legible enough if you knew what to look for. "The date is from 2021, I whispered, a chill running down my spine. "And look at the logo on the band. That's from St. Jude's. We don't even have a St. Jude's in our state." David nodded grimly. "She kept an old wristband from years ago and posed with it. Look at the 4-line. It's taped to her arm, but it's not actually inserted into a vein. There's no flash of blood in the hub. It's a prop." My stomach churned. It was one thing to exaggerate symptoms. It was another to construct a literal movie set in her supposedly sick room to defraud strangers out of thousands of dollars. We dug deeper. I found an update where she thanked her amazing specialist, Dr. Eris Thorne, for his groundbreaking care. I pulled up the state medical board's database, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. I typed the name in. No results. I checked neighboring states. Nothing. Dr. Eris Thorne did not exist. The entire foundation of her illness was built on fabricated doctors, recycled props, and stolen sympathy. My sister wasn't just sick in the head. She was running a highly calculated scam. I realized her online fundraising page was hiding an even darker, more expensive secret. For the next 2 weeks, my apartment turned into a war room. David and I spent every evening after our hospital shifts analyzing Mia's digital footprint. We were finding discrepancies everywhere. Mia had posted a photo of a supposed brain scan showing severe inflammation. David ran a reverse image search. It was a stock photo from a medical textbook available for public download. We found forged letters of medical necessity, purportedly written by various clinics, used to solicit donations. The letterheads were pixelated, and the signatures were suspiciously identical despite being from different doctors. But the most damning evidence came from her location data. Mia wasn't as smart as she thought she was. She frequently posted photos of herself, bedridden and crying in pain, but she forgot to scrub the metadata from the original image files she occasionally linked to on her blog. David used an extractor tool to pull the GPS coordinates and timestamps. On the exact weekend she claimed she was undergoing excruciating spinal taps in a sterile facility, the photo's metadata placed her at a luxury beachfront resort in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. "She's funding vacations with her GoFundMe," I said, feeling absolutely nauseous. I remembered my dad picking up extra shifts at a hardware store just to buy her specialized organic groceries. I remembered my mom crying over the eviction notice. While they were starving themselves to keep her alive, she was sipping margaritas on a beach, laughing at all of them. I started tracing the GoFundMe updates to her lifestyle changes. A plea for a custom wheelchair aligned perfectly with the timeline of her buying a brand new designer handbag she subtly flashed in a later photo. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. She was bleeding our parents dry, but the donations were fueling a completely different kind of lifestyle. We had proven she was lying about the illness, but I needed to know exactly where the massive sums of money were actually going. What we found next elevated her scam from a moral failing to a federal crime. I knew Mia had to be storing her fraudulent wealth somewhere. My parents paid her rent for the recovery apartment, so she had zero living expenses. $60,000 from GoFundMe, plus whatever cash our parents gave her, had to be sitting somewhere. I recalled the spa bill from Sedona. I logged into a public records database, paying a small fee to search business registrations in our state and neighboring ones. I searched her name, her middle name, and variations of it. Nothing. Then, I remembered a strange phrase she used constantly on her blog, Silver Linings Recovery. I typed Silver Linings into the corporate registry search bar. A hit popped up. It was a limited liability company registered in Nevada. The managing director? Mia's legal name. The registered agent? A proxy service. I dug into the property records tied to the LLC. My jaw practically hit the floor. The LLC didn't just hold cash. It owned a 2-bedroom vacation condo in a trendy part of Las Vegas, purchased entirely in cash just 8 months ago. My sister, the tragic, bedridden victim whose medical bills were about to render our parents completely homeless, was a real estate investor. This wasn't just about getting attention or getting out of family obligations anymore. This was felony wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. She was systematically extracting wealth from sympathetic strangers and our devastated parents to build a hidden empire for herself. The anger I felt wasn't just hot, it was blinding, absolute white-hot rage. I thought about my dad, 62 years old, standing on his feet for 10 hours a day at the hardware store. I thought about my mother, crying over an eviction notice for a house she had spent 30 years making a home. Also, Mia could own a secret condo in Vegas and take luxury spa trips under the guise of holistic treatments. I printed every document and deed. I had everything I needed to destroy her, but I faced an impossible moral choice. I had physical folders thick with undeniable proof. The forged doctor signatures, the stock photo scans, the metadata proving her resort vacations, and the LLC documents proving her secret real estate holdings. I even had David record a phone call where he posed as a medical billing specialist calling the clinic she supposedly went to in Germany. The number was a dead line, an empty front. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by the paper trail of my sister's sociopathy, facing a massive moral dilemma. If I took this straight to the police, Mia would be arrested for fraud. The GoFundMe donations alone were enough to trigger a massive federal investigation. But if the authorities stepped in first, my parents would find out about their golden child from the evening news or a detective knocking on their door. It would utterly break them. They were already financially ruined. The psychological shock of a police raid might actually kill my father. But if I told my parents first, they might try to protect her. The denial ran so deep, they might actually help her hide the assets or warn her to flee before the police could act. I couldn't let Mia escape consequences, but I couldn't let my parents go to prison for aiding and abetting a fugitive either. I discussed it with David over stale pizza. You have to control the blast radius, Chloe, he said firmly. You have to show them the evidence in a way that they can't deny, but you have to do it before she gets wind of what you're doing. We formulated a plan. I would orchestrate a confrontation. I wouldn't just tell my parents. I would trap Mia in her own lies right in front of them, leaving no room for her manipulative tears. I needed to force them to see the monster they had been protecting all these years. It was the only way to save them from losing the house entirely and going to jail for her. Before I could set the trap, my phone buzzed with a catastrophic social media alert. My heart hammered against my ribs as I looked at the notification. Mia had just gone live on Instagram. I clicked the link, dread pooling in my stomach. She was sitting in her apartment, looking disheveled and tearful, a masterclass in performative suffering. Hey guys, she sniffled, wiping away an imaginary tear. I'm making this video because I am just so heartbroken. My own sister, Chloe, is trying to sabotage my treatment. I froze. Did she know? Had I left a digital footprint she tracked? She has been harassing me, telling our parents I don't deserve care, Mia continued, her voice trembling perfectly. She's even threatening to call the hospital and cancel my appointments because she's jealous of the financial help I'm getting. Please, send positive energy. I feel so unsafe. She wasn't onto the investigation. She was just doing preemptive damage control because I had pushed back at the family meeting. She was insulating herself, turning her followers against me so that if I ever spoke up, I would look like a jealous, crazy stalker. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with a furious text from my mother. How dare you terrorize your dying sister? You are dead to us. The manipulation was brilliant. She was tightening her grip on my parents, making them view me as a literal threat to her life. If I showed up at their house with folders of evidence now, they would call the cops on me for trespassing. I had to pivot. I couldn't just show up. I needed a setting where they felt they had the upper hand, a place where Mia felt secure enough to drop her guard, and where my parents would be forced to sit and listen. I ignored my mother's hateful text and drafted a very specific, highly calculated email to both of my parents and Mia. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to write. I swallowed my pride and sent a message offering exactly what she wanted to hear. The email I sent was a masterpiece of fake groveling. I wrote that I had done a lot of soul-searching and realized how selfish I had been. I apologized for questioning Mia's illness and said I wanted to make amends by helping them organize the logistics for the German stem cell clinic. I have contacts in international medical billing. I lied. Let me help you secure the funding and manage the GoFundMe so Dad doesn't have to stress about the paperwork. Let's meet on Saturday at the private conference room at the community center to go over the strategy. The bait was irresistible. Free administrative labor and a sibling finally bending the knee to the golden child. Within an hour, my dad replied with a terse, "We will be there at 2 p.m. Saturday arrived. David came with me, dressed in business casual to look like a financial consultant. I had 4 thick binders sitting on the mahogany table of the rented conference room. My parents arrived first, looking exhausted and wary. Mia walked in 5 minutes later, leaning heavily on a cane she didn't need, wearing a neck brace she had definitely bought off Amazon. "Chloe," my mother said coldly, crossing her arms. "This better be a real apology." "It's more of a presentation, Mom," I said smoothly, gesturing to the chairs. Mia dramatically lowered herself into a seat, wincing with every micro-movement. "I just hope you're finally ready to support my healing journey," Mia whispered, giving me a magnanimous, forgiving smile that made my blood boil. "Oh, I am," I replied, sliding the first thick binder across the table toward my father. "I've organized everything about your healing journey. Every single detail, including the exact GPS coordinates of your last miraculous recovery." David stood silently by the door, ensuring no one could easily storm out of the room before the truth was entirely exposed. The trap was finally sprung. My father opened the binder, and the color instantly drained from his tired, lined face. "What is this?" my dad muttered, staring at the glossy prints of Mia jogging in the parking lot. "Those are from 3 weeks ago, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "The day she couldn't walk." Mia's head snapped up. "That's photoshopped. She's obsessed with ruining me," she cried. I slid the next folder over. "Here are the forged letters from the doctors, Mom. Notice how the signatures are identical? And here is the metadata from her hospital photos. She wasn't in the ICU. She was in Cabo." My mother stared at the papers, her hands trembling violently. No, her GoFundMe paid for her specialists." I slammed the LLC documents onto the table. "Her GoFundMe paid for a luxury condo in Las Vegas, registered under a shell company. She has been stealing from you, from strangers, and faking her illness to live like royalty." The room went dead silent. The undeniable truth was staring them in the face. Mia panicked. She resorted to her ultimate weapon. She gasped, clutched her chest, and threw herself out of the chair, thrashing on the carpet in what was supposed to look like a violent seizure. My mother screamed, lunging forward. "Get away from her," David barked, stepping forward with his nurse's authority. He didn't offer a pillow or soft words. He grabbed Mia's wrist, checked her pulse, and loudly announced, "Pulse is steady at 80 BPM. No pupil dilation. She's faking it. Stop the act, Mia, or I'm calling paramedics to strap you to a gurney and run a talk screen." The thrashing stopped immediately. Mia sat up, her hair a mess, the neck brace askew. The pitiful victim vanished. She looked at me with a face twisted in pure, venomous hatred. The mask had completely slipped, revealing the cold, calculating predator beneath. My parents watched in absolute, paralyzed horror as their supposedly dying daughter sneered at us with perfect health. The silence in the room was shattered by the sound of my mother violently sobbing. Watching my parents realize that the last 10 years of their lives were a lie was the most agonizing thing I have ever witnessed. My father collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands, weeping with a guttural, hollow sound. He had sold his retirement, his peace of mind, and his relationship with me for a mirage. My mother just stared at Mia, repeating, "How could you? How could you?" Mia didn't apologize. Cornered and exposed, she turned vicious. "You're both pathetic," she spat at my parents, standing up perfectly straight, tossing the fake cane aside. "You wanted a sick kid to dote on to give your boring lives meaning. I just gave you what you wanted." She stormed out of the conference room, leaving utter devastation in her wake. The aftermath was swift and brutal. David and I helped my dad report the GoFundMe fraud to the platform, which immediately froze her accounts. I handed the binders of evidence over to the local police department. Because wire fraud across state lines was involved, the FBI eventually took an interest. Within weeks, the Vegas condo was seized. My parents' bankruptcy went through, and they lost my childhood home. They had to move into a tiny, cramped rental apartment on the bad side of town. The illusion was shattered, but the financial ruin was entirely real. Mia was arrested 3 months later at a luxury spa she had somehow managed to book before her accounts were completely frozen. Seeing her mugshot on the local news, stripped of her filters, her fake 4 tubes, and her adoring online fans, brought me no joy. It just felt like a heavy, exhausting tragedy. Our family was fundamentally, irreversibly broken. The parents who had banished me were now utterly dependent on my administrative skills to navigate the very bankruptcy their golden child had forced them into. They were crushed under the weight of their own enabling. I had to figure out how to rebuild a relationship with parents who chose her. The legal consequences for Mia were severe. She accepted a plea deal for felony fraud to avoid a lengthy trial, resulting in a 3-year prison sentence and a massive restitution order she will likely never pay off. I didn't go to her sentencing. I had completely cut her out of my life, blocking her on every possible avenue. The harder part was dealing with my parents. The guilt they felt toward me was suffocating. My mother constantly apologized, crying over the graduation dinner she missed, the years she ignored me, the eviction they suffered. I helped them navigate their bankruptcy, using my administrative background to organize their remaining debts and find them affordable health care, but I established ironclad boundaries. I refused to let them talk about Mia. If they brought her up, I left the room. It sounds harsh, but it was the only way I could protect my own mental health. We started attending family therapy, which was excruciating but necessary. The therapist helped my parents confront the uncomfortable truth. They had been enablers. They had ignored the red flags because being the martyr parents of a chronically ill child had become their entire identity. Stripping that away left them feeling completely empty. It took over a year for my dad to look me in the eye without flinching with shame. Slowly, carefully, we began to build a new dynamic. I wasn't the forgotten, invisible sister anymore. I was the anchor. But being the anchor is exhausting, and I had to learn to prioritize my own life, my career, and my relationship with friends like David who stood by me when my family didn't. I stopped trying to fix everything for them. I helped them set up a strict budget, but I refused to give them a single dime of my own hard-earned money. If they were going to survive this, they had to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet without a crisis. Walking away from the chaos was the hardest and most important decision of my life. It's been 2 years since the conference room confrontation. Mia is still serving her sentence. Her former online community turned on her with a vengeance, dedicating entire forums to dissecting her lies. Munchausen by internet, or factitious disorder for financial gain, is a terrifyingly real phenomenon. It preys on human empathy, weaponizing our natural instinct to care for the sick. If you are dealing with a family member who constantly has a new, vague, incurable crisis that demands your time, money, and emotional energy, pay attention to the inconsistencies. Look at the paperwork. Trust your gut. Don't let someone guilt trip you into ignoring basic logic. Emotional manipulation thrives in the dark, wrapped in tears and medical jargon. Shining a light on it is painful, and the fallout can destroy your family's structure. But the alternative is letting a parasite drain you until there is nothing left. Today, my life is peaceful. I got promoted to a senior administrative role at the hospital. My parents are slowly adjusting to their modest new reality, and for the first time in my life, they asked me how my day was, and they actually listened to the answer. Last weekend, David and I went hiking. As I stood at the top of the trail, looking out over the vast, quiet landscape, I realized I finally felt light. The crushing, gloomy weight of my sister's fake illness was gone. I had survived the exile, exposed the fraud, and reclaimed my life. Sometimes, the only way to save your family is to burn down the toxic illusion they are living in. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. You have to demand the truth, even when the truth means watching the people you love lose everything they thought they knew. Stand your ground, gather your evidence, and never let anyone make you feel crazy for seeing the reality they refuse to acknowledge. The truth cost us everything, but it was the only way to finally be free.